Let's jump into it. So welcome everyone to the July Lead CCA Open Mic, the recap for the Cyber AB Town Hall. Hope you all were able to attend that. And yeah, let's have an open discussion about what we heard. The exciting updates. The main attraction was the Title 48. So let's open it up. What were your thoughts? Anything earth-shattering or surprises?
I just had to laugh at the first guy's comment. It was genius. I don't know. Did you guys read it?
Which one? I don't think I saw it. What was it?
I'll post it in here. You have to read it. It is classic. It was, but
I like the comment about the since what's the word? Existing evidence is not in the rule. Like, will they need to amend it versus just a Cyber AB saying that that's their interpretation or guidance? Kind of interesting.
Yeah, that one keeps coming up. It is super interesting, and I'm not a lawyer, but I am curious who actually makes the rules, right? I mean, obviously 32 CFR 170 is the law, and so if there's a different interpretation, how is that? You know, again, just thinking about as people go through, if they're unhappy with the result and they appeal, and it keeps going higher and higher. It is just very interesting to me. And where else are there places that could be interpreted differently?
Right.
But it's a huge one. I mean, it really is. Having been through a lot of assessments at this point, I mean, it's a pretty big responsibility to say that nothing new can happen versus making small changes. It actually mentioned. I remember seeing the slide. It said that there's another authority that allows quick fixes. I don't know if you guys know what that is. I don't know what that is. I couldn't find it in 32 CFR 170. I'm not aware that exists. So I think this sounded like it could be the quick fix authority. I'm curious if maybe I just missed where in the law I talked about that, because the limited practice deficiency is not a thing anymore. There's temporary deficiencies, but that's not this. This is a little different than what we're talking about of making minor changes. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that authority. If anyone else is, please jump in. Exactly.
I haven't seen it.
I'm not either. But certain get confusing where it's like, okay, we have the rule, and then okay, what authority does a Cyber AB have to make basically additions to that or their interpretations? It'll be interesting how that may play out in court.
This was an interesting thing at Seek West out in Vegas. Is this was brought up on stage. People were saying things, and then Matt came in and corrected it, saying this is not new fabricated evidence during an assessment, or afterwards, the stuff that didn't exist. It was things that were just missed or couldn't be found during the assessment. And then, as soon as he left, I heard some C3PAOs be like, well, it's not in the rule. The 10 days is in the rule, but defining existing is not in the rule. So until it's in the rule, we're just going to keep doing it as you got 10 days to fix it.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I've been given that guidance by a C3PAO for an assessment.
I mean, that is what the law says.
Which, yeah, technically, it is the law.
So let's see. I don't know. I can't see
there's the original comment, the first comment in the Q&A.
You mind reading that, Mark? For whatever reason, I can't see it. I can't because I'm doing a live stream.
This guy jumped in. He says, I applied for lead CCA about 4 months ago. Still waiting for Cyber AB to verify my certification and experience. Every month, quote, we'll look into it. Also every month, crickets. The help desk has been about as useful as a password policy that allows password 123 exclamation point. I get it. Things can take a while, but at this rate, I'm expecting my verification letter to arrive by carrier pigeon with a scroll sealed in wax. No updates, no way to submit, no idea if I'm lost in the system or if someone's playing Minesweeper on my application dashboard. Just a little transparency would go a long way, or even a smoke signal. Heck, I'd settle for a message in Morse code tapped out via email footer. Cyber AB folks, if you see this, please, for the love of sanity and responsibility, matrices, throw me a freaking bone here.
He's unhappy. He's fed up.
Well, and then Mike Snyder jumped in and says, I'm looking at it right now.
Right. He finally got their attention.
I mean, that is the elephant in the room, which I wanted to ask, but it's like, Cyber AB, you guys are as bad as the DoD responding to emails. I mean, I know they're understaffed, but still, it's just not acceptable.
Well, I had the same thing with the SCF ecosystem. So the AB is over the SCF ecosystem, and it's just as bad. So it's not just the CMMC ecosystem with.
I mean, just look at those numbers every month. I mean, it is going up exponentially, and I don't know if Cyber AB is hiring exponentially, but I'm sure they're again, they're a nonprofit 501c3, and so they have to find a smart way to do it, either grow it organically or contract it out. Honestly, I offered, we have 7 active duty skill bridgers right now. They're not HX Defense employees. And so I offered them up for help if you want to help them look at resumes or do whatever. But that's another email that is in the queue to be answered soon, I'm sure. But yeah, they need help. We need to get creative on ways to support this, because it affects all of us. Because again, we need assessors. There's an assessor shortage, as we understand. And also, not that it undermines trust in the system, but I think it just makes people like this gentleman that has very colorful comment. I mean, it certainly gives him a negative impression of the overall system that we're trying to do. And I know what you guys do in assessments is extremely difficult and extremely challenging. And so anything that can undermine what we do, I just think we need to find creative ways to fix as a community.
A lot of people have spent a lot of money.
I didn't quite catch how many people were in the queue for CCA and CCP.
Yeah, I did. I did screenshots of everything.
Yeah, I've got.
There were 939 CCAs in queue.
Okay, that hasn't gone up that much, but the number of leads has gone up a lot. So they are adjudicating leads, it seems, at least at some rate.
Yeah, and they didn't show CCPs in queue, just CC.
Interesting, because they have in the past.
This was the first time I think they showed the number of companies who failed their assessment. I thought that was insightful. So 8 have failed so far.
Yeah, I'm really surprised it's that low. That's great. That's like the best news I've seen all day. 58 passed, and then 11 conditional, 8 failed.
I want to see the number of false starts.
Yeah, I think, Zach, I think that some of these companies are somehow converting their assessments to mock assessments somewhere in the middle of their phase 2 or at the end of phase 1. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I think there's some of that going on.
Yeah, and false starts, like in the chat.
Yeah, false starts. I think that's a creative interpretation of 32 CFR 170, to start a certification assessment and say, no, just kidding. A mock. I don't know. That seems a little suspicious. That being said, though, when I was in the Air Force, that is how they did PT tests. You could do a mock PT test, and if you passed, it could be your record one. I love the Air Force.
Yeah. Well, that was the Air Force. Guidance. It wasn't like that in the Marine Corps.
Oh, no, in the Marines, you just
and they have
beat you up
optional
regardless, yeah.
What are y'all placing bets? What are you thinking? October 1st, we're going to see it in the Federal Register, or November, before, after?
I think it's going to be early September.
Closer to November 1st.
November for Mike.
I would say Thanksgiving, so that no one has time to they go on vacation when everyone's complaining. It's always a holiday.
I typically do it doing that. Wait for holiday.
I'm going to be more optimistic and say September 1st.
I think September 1st is reasonable. It's also way shorter than the Title 32 CFR, don't you? Yeah. It's way shorter. I mean, it's simpler.
I think it was interesting, some of the things that Michael Gruden pointed out that could derail or change the final implementation. Everything from politics to maybe not compliant with EOs.
Yeah, but I think if there was debate and challenge, it would have been with the CMMC rules, much bigger, and it still went through.
That's true, but it was a different administration when that went through. I don't think that's going to happen. I think I agree with Matt Travis that there's no indications that that's going to be the case. It was interesting, all of the things that could possibly derail it at this point, because in the ecosystem in general, people seem to think that, well, it's gone to OIRA, it's done. And that's not the case. But
did you guys see the memo from the Defense Secretary and his push on CMMC?
From SecDef? I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah. So he released a memo that said, guys, this is serious. It's time to get really serious. We're not messing around. So there was like 4 things he talked about. CMMC was number 1 in this memo. Number 2 was the software development cycle. And I can't remember what 3 and 4 were, but he's really serious about pushing everybody, especially in the supplier sector and the DIB, to get serious about cybersecurity. And he actually lists China and Russia in there, that we need to get serious about it because of them.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So
That'd be great. Yeah. Maybe use less software that has Chinese people
yeah. Oh, it's
maintaining it.
hardware from China. That was sorry, Zach. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, hardware from China. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's good. I mean, if like we would say at NSA and the forensics office, if you have hands-on hardware, like it's over. Like there's nothing you're really going to be able to do. And I think if you have Chinese intelligence with sysadmin in your system, like it's pretty much game over. So I think it's very smart to look at that and try to weed it out. It seems like a pretty easy one there.
So they brought up self-attestation, and I was in a conversation with a person who works for DoD in the program management office who referred me over to the DoD website. And if you click on the link up the top of the website, it will take you down to a couple of, I don't know what you call them, some sort of, discussions. And it emphasizes the ability to do a self-assessment for level 2. And I asked this person about, well, what does that mean for, say, like an MSP or an MSSP? Does that mean that we can do a self-attestation for level 2 and then be able to have our customers inherit from us? Or what exactly does that mean? Because it's a pretty broad brush that they give it, and they don't talk about the restrictions on what a self-attestation means in that case.
Well, I think it's just SPRS. So they do their self-attestation and upload it into SPRS. And I think in the past, everybody lied. And now I think people are more serious and they understand. But like contracts are going to start stating it in there, but it'll require a much higher SPRS score. That's my opinion.
I think the problem's going to be is the flow down certification requirements, right? So even with the self-attestation level 2, with, you mentioned MSPs, I think the problem is going to be certification flow down requirements, not necessarily a level requirement. And the certification is that distinction point. And so, I don't know. I don't see how a self-attestation for an MSP would be able to flow down to OSCs at all.
Well, that's the case also for a C3PAO assessment of an MSP, because the C3PAO is assessing MSP's internal system. They're not assessing the services that MSP is providing to its clients. So remember, there's not really a requirement for an MSP to be level 2 assessed unless they're handling CUI, transmitting, processing, or storing CUI, right?
Yeah, most of the MSPs I talk to that do it, want a certification is so that they don't have to sit in every assessment.
Yeah, that's not the case. That's
They
just not the
still
case.
have to.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Trust me, I know.
It's not going to get them out of sitting in those assessments. Yeah, there's just no way.
Yeah, what it does show is their customer. They chose their customers that they know the process and they know what it takes.
Right.
And so it gives the customer a confidence level in that MSP, but it doesn't have any tangible benefit.
Well, it's a can of worms, I guess, but the CAP does talk about the things that an MSP does, the CMMC certified MSP does for a client can be considered validated, quote fingers. It's done, I think Matt in one of the either C3PA or town halls in the last couple of months affirmed that it's not the word inheritance, but it's pretty close to it. So at least being able to validate that. So if you have an MSP that does a lot for a small business, it still could be reevaluated, but it also could be considered validated. So I think it does. It lowers the burden for an OSC and it should lower the cost.
Yeah, and Matt did say for FedRAMP it can be inherited, but for level 2 MSP it's not inherited because it's still a shared responsibility. So the way I looked at it, I've thought a lot about this because I've assessed 3 different level 2 MSPs and then another MSP itself. So the example I was thinking about, somebody gave the example of houses. So here's the way I look at it. FedRAMP is like a contractor developer coming in and building a whole subdivision plat. So they get the sidewalks, the roads, the sewers, and all that. And that is like FedRAMP. And then you have a MSP that gets level 2, and they build their model homes. And there's model home. And let's say I come in, I'm the what do you call them? The
Inspector.
Thanks, Zach. The inspector, and I come in and inspect that house. And then that MSP, they have level 2 inspection on that house. Well, then they build a house right next door. It's still a new house, and it has to be inspected. But if I go and inspect the next house, it's going to be way faster because I know exactly that. I've looked at the architecture plans. I know where the plumbing is. I know the roof. I know this. I know that. And so I can come in and I can do an inspection. And then the next house that the MSP builds or company that they deploy, and I go and do that assessment, it's going to be even faster, and so forth. So I think it's a huge benefit to the MSPs and to the OSCs because as an inspector, I've inspected the architecture diagrams. I've already inspected all the different pieces and parts. And so it just makes it so much easier and faster.
I think that's an excellent way of putting it, Mark.
I like
That's
it.
an excellent analogy. Can we all agree that CyberAB is the tax collector?
Yeah, that was one of the questions tonight is what's the benefit of a $5,000 renewal for an RPO every year versus grassroots marketing?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Mike Parsons, I put you on mute because I was testing to see if I was hearing that squilling when I put you on mute. I think it's your fan that when I take you off mute, I hear like a squilling sound. So that's the only reason.
So, Monty, your question, yes, at least for me. So I work with a lot of C3POs. And when they say, Mark, how much is an assessment? How many hours is assessment going to take? If I'm doing a VDI that's already had an MSP level 2 assessment, yeah, my hours are almost half. So
you'll hear it.
OSCs, they're going to save money if they do go with
That's
an
a firewall.
MSP that's level 2. Does everybody agree? Disagree?
I would agree with you, Mark.
Yeah.
Because if you understand the process, you're going to be very proactive in doing the process over and over again. That's going to speed things up naturally.
Right.
I saw that when we were doing that for the Navy and the Marine Corps. When you come in and do an assessment and you have the same assessor, that helps as well. But if you have the individual who's the PM or the PEO, who knows what that process looks like, who has the templates, who's been through it more than once, they've been through it 3 or 4 or 5 times, they want their team to get very efficient with delivering that quality of documentation and evidence before the assessor gets on the ground.
Exactly. So it's very intangible, but a benefit.
Yeah, but to Monty's second question, I have C3POs that ask me how many hours it will take me, and then they bid based on how many hours me as a lead, and then my team can do that assessment, and then they take that and they will pass on. Also, my clients that I have that I'm helping in the readiness phase, many times I'll say, look, if you go with a level 2 MSP, it's going to be cheaper because I will work with them to make sure it's cheaper because I know that it's going to be faster. It's not going to take as many hours.
Yeah. I've seen that as well, Monty, the savings passed on to the OSC.
It really depends. It's a great point for an OSC that's looking at this. I think a lot don't realize that there is such variability, that there's some C3POs that charge a fixed fee no matter what it is. There's some that do it hourly. And you really could pay $10,000 or $100,000 for the exact same assessment with the exact same score put into SPURS. And it really is incumbent on an OSC to do that research, especially if they're using an MSP or CSP where some of the responsibilities may be alleviated. I honestly don't know what the option is. I mean, so let's say the Title 48 rule goes into effect September 1st, there's no delay. September 1st, 26 is when third-party assessments are required. Again, they change. But if there's 78,000 companies that DoD thinks need it, I think it's something like that, and there's 77 C3POs, it's like 500 a day. It's just impossible unless, I mean, truly, the number, like the math doesn't math.
Yeah.
I think the only way this is going to work is when there's dozens of MSPs that are doing a substantial part of the work, and OSCs are signing up with them and able to get assessments quickly. Everyone doing it the hard way, we're just never going to get to 500 assessments a day. There's going to be a massive bottleneck, I think.
So I didn't get the context of, it was a conversation I was hearing from Jacob Horn and Scott from Summit 7, and they were talking about how many that they were actually pushing out in terms of assessments concurrently. And the highest number I heard them talk about was 5.
Yeah, and he did mention that on his podcast, and the whole he said 4 or 5 this week, which is great. But I think the real bottleneck is going to be the lead CCAs, because but it's going to shift. So right now, most of the lead CCAs, they're on for the whole assessment, but it's going to shift, and then you have a CCA, and then you got your QA, and CCPs really aren't used these days.
Right.
I think the shift is going to be that the CCAs are going to become kind of like a partner in an audit, where they're going to shift more to, hey, I'm overseeing 4 or 5 different assessments in a week. The CCA is kind of the lead to run that, and then they have CCPs that'll help them in the questioning and the documentation. So I think, and I've talked to a lot of C3POs, and that's kind of the model everybody's going to move to, but a lot of the C3POs have lead assessors that are just learning the process, and they want to get as much experience as they can, and then they'll start overseeing more assessments as the CCAs and the CCPs start to play more of a factor in that process.
I think 2 problems with the CCA marketplace right now is I got a call from a client this week, OSC, that was looking for someone to help them, and they were calling CCAs. And a lot of the people that they were reaching out to actually worked for a OSC. And so the OSC employees that have gone out and gotten their CCA, so the CCA stats, I think, are skewed because not everyone that's listed as a CCA or a lead CCA is actually a practicing assessor. A lot of them work for OSCs to be the expert in their office. So I think the stats are even worse than we see.
But I do know some CCAs and lead CCAs that work for OSCs that also do CCA on the side.
Yeah, well, and I would say the flip side of it too is I see a lot of C3PAOs that call me and they just want my CCA name to be tied to their C3PAO, and then I never get called for an assessment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get at least one of those a week.
But I think it'll ramp up because I think they all have 10 to 20 different 1099s, and they're trying to get ready for when the flood opens, and then they'll start calling you. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, especially with the model of a lead CCA that's overseeing multiple ones. They're already trying to move to that now because, there's no other way to get to as many assessments as will be needed.
So, Mark, did you share this? Like, you shared the link to the Lockheed memo. You want to talk to it? That came out here last week.
And Jacob, I read this a couple weeks ago, but then I listened to Jacob over the weekend, and he said, this is like the 6th memo they've sent to their suppliers that basically say, guys, it's time to get serious. You're not in the ball game if you're not getting serious about this and getting compliant. And this is for real. Because a lot of the suppliers, they don't want this to happen, especially the manufacturers. They are not happy about this. They were hoping Doge would kill it because it's expensive and they don't want to do it. They're manufacturers. We had one company, a manufacturing company, that just went out of business because it's a tough business out there.
Are you guys familiar with the forecast for government acquisitions?
Say that again?
Not familiar with forecast acquisitions for different agencies?
I don't think so.
If not, just putting it out there for a lot of government people. Usually when primes are going for contracts or new contracts, they go to agencies' websites and they look at their forecast list for things that they want in the future. And so they'll be planning out these teams like years in advance in order to be able to present that to the agencies. That's why a lot of primes are really going to be starting to build their teams like well in advance. So they'll be reaching out more for your certification ahead of time. So a lot of people don't know how far they plan out these contracts and build their teams. So that's one of the main reasons why they're pushing the button way early, because they have to.
And people are concentrating on Lockheed Martin, but I do know that General Dynamics, there are definitely requirements in many of their contracts for CMMC. And I've talked to multiple OSCs that have told me that they have lost contracts because they're not CMMC certified. Lost contracts with General Dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the prime has that discretion. I know I had a client where they're a defense contractor, and in order to submit an RFP, they had to demonstrate they already submitted their level 1 attestation in Spurs. If they didn't have that evidence, they wouldn't have been able to submit on that RFP. And this was a couple months ago for that as well.
On the flip side, if you guys do run across anything with the Army Corps of Engineers, they're a little bit behind, and they've gave allowances to their contractors and their primes that really surprised the heck out of me. So if you do run across that area, I would definitely be aware.
That's interesting. And Alex, you may be able to talk more to this, but last week I had a prospective client reach out and say that they had just won a DLA contract, and DLA, I guess the contracting officer was pushing them to either attest to CMMC compliance or demonstrate CMMC compliance for DLA.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that. DLA, they're just to even bid on like a blanket purchase agreement or almost anything they do before they release any type of contracts or information or documents, they make sure that you have that score on Spurs. So you're going to have a lot of people who you're going to see a lot of customers who either need contracts with DLA who are trying to get into it,
right,
SBIR or JCP certifications. So there's going to be a lot of that coming real soon.
There's going to be other agencies that are requiring these certifications. I was a part of an assessment. I can't tell you which government agency was involved, but it had nothing to do with DoD. And the government agency was requiring a CMMC level 2 certification for their prime contract.
Wow.
Well, I think
I've seen the request shift from 853 moderate with Department of Energy to CMMC with one of my clients. So they were midway through a 53 moderate, and then they had to shift to CMMC.
Wow,
it's a great shift. Saved $1 million. Oh, that's good.
But yeah, it is super.
Yeah. On the MSP side, we have a client that said that it's very. They're I think with NIH, and they have a requirement for something to have 800-171 compliance, and that's been the question: is how do we prove that? How do we show that? And so that it seems to be the going, even though it's not necessarily required. Having that certification is really the best way to show that you're 800-171 compliant. I don't think there's a more legitimate way to do it. So yeah, it's definitely expanding. We can definitely see the numbers going up, and it's going to be pretty wild once this 48 rule comes out.
Absolutely. So
I think a lot of the agencies are going to jump on this as an easy way to get their contractors in line.
Yeah, and they have the right. I mean, I think that was what the FAR rule came out with, was basically you can use it if you want, but you don't have to.
Right.
But I think you're right. I think a lot of them will.
Their discretion. So last month on the town hall, they had mentioned, Matt Travis mentioned about the FedRAMP Moderate Equivalent. And we're talking about how that may impact companies like Prevail. Zach, I know you have followed up. Did you get any more insight or anything else you share about how CQBL should treat FedRAMP Moderate Equivalent?
Yeah. From what I've seen, they're happy to answer questions, but I think rightfully the FedRAMP Moderate Equivalent CSPs are pushing back on that requirement.
Yeah.
To participate. So, it's another one of those ones that it's not fully adjudicated yet. I'm truly excited for the C3PO Advisory Council that CyberB is standing up, because we'll have professionals in looking at different things like the CAP and external service providers. And again, going back to the start of the conversation, who can come up with these rules? And even if it's just recommendations to Congress or DoD or whatever it is, I think having a group that can focus on some of these issues and create this body of knowledge across the entire community of 400 something CCAs at this point, I think will be really helpful. Kind of like what the C3PO advisory forum's been doing for years. I mean, just that level of service, it's really important, even though it's not, again, law, whatever they come up with. It's super helpful for framing certain ambiguous or confusing things in a way that makes sense. And it gives OSCs something to, at least a little bit of hope and understanding. I mean, this stuff's confusing for us just imagine what it's like for an OSC trying to figure this out.
Have you
Well,
guys
and
have
with-
you guys had any familiarity with FedRAMP 20X? And the reason I'm asking that is here in Dallas at our CPN CMMC meetup group, we had a speaker who was he's a FedRAMP 3 PAO CEO, and he was talking about FedRAMP 20X and how that could very easily make equivalency kind of obsolete, but yet at the same time really increase the amount of companies that could get a FedRAMP certification and enter the ecosystem as providers. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's super exciting. Just from the bit I've read about it, I think the idea is that everything is essentially automated. Your documentation, everything is in a repo somewhere, and you go through a lot of automated checks, get through PO to look at it, and then you can be, I think now it's FedRAMP low is what they're looking at to start. And then the plan is to go from moderate to the future. Yeah, I mean, just from the old days on active duty, talking to companies that said they had to get ATOs. I mean, as soon as a company said they have to get an ATO, you could just tell like an angel just lost its wings, right? They're like, well, we just got a $75,000 SIBR, now we have to get an ATO. Like that's like 1/20th of what it's going to cost. And so, yeah, anything to lower down. I think that is a awesome move by the administration to try to modernize this. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how it plays out. I think it'll really help smaller organizations that have cloud solutions that they want to offer DoD, and great for CMMC as well. Certainly, I agree. I think it would be kind of crazy to go through FedRAMP Moderate Equivalency if there's a path to get an automated low and then an automated medium when they're ready without an agency sponsor.
Right. And from what I understand, if that automated medium, when it happens, is going to be a real FedRAMP moderate certification authorization.
Yeah. No sponsor needed. No CHAD.
No sponsor needed, and it's not going to be an equivalency.
Yeah, the sponsor's the hardest thing. I know a lot of people that want to. They're ready. They're compliant. They just don't have a sponsor. So, yeah, it sounds like a great thing.
What do y'all think about the CMMC
So
International?
I've been listening to a couple of potential competitors to Prevail, but they're dealing in Microsoft GCC Hive. One of them is Island. I can't remember what the last part of their name is. Another one's FedHive. Has anybody had any experience with those guys? They're actually carving out, much like Zach has done with the Google workspace, where they actually have an enclave set up and brings onboards people into that enclave.
Yeah, QuickTrack is doing that. QuickTrack is doing that for GCC Hive.
Yeah, I haven't heard of those companies specifically. I think the problem is going to be, well, because I've seen XQ, which kind of is along those same lines as Prevail, but unless you're talking about Island, the browser, which I think
no, it's different.
Yeah.
So there's Island, the browser, which is interesting. I've talked to them a bunch. They are trying to figure out how to make themselves compliant, and part of the whole ecosystem, they're still trying to figure it out, though. But this Island company, they always go to the Seek West, Seek East, and they're trying to do kind of what Zach did with Google, and they're trying to do the same as what QuickTrack and some of these others have done. I've talked to them once, did a demo. I mean, it's looks good. I haven't seen an assessment done on it yet, though, or heard about it.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. I think it's great. There's no way that we're going to get enough businesses certified if we don't have a number of these solutions that are out there. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for the market for dozens of these to pop up. But my question to any of the suitors would be, okay, how many clients have you gotten certified? If the answer is 0, I don't know. Until you go through that process, I think that's really the big milestone. But I would love nothing more if I had a dozen competitors by the end of the year, because it's going to drive prices down for everyone, and it's going to make CMMC less of a nightmare. We have to get there if we want this to be a successful program.
Agreed. Definitely.
So, Derek, you asked a question. Whose dog?
About the CMMC International. So they say they have a application, C3PO application from Taiwan, Canada, Japan showing interest. What are y'all thoughts about that and how those assessments?
That's going to be huge. And people aren't even really thinking about that yet. And not only we're talking about the world, even Canada has a lot of stuff going on that we're not even thinking about. So you talk about that, the rest of the world, and then all Zach about competition. Are you even counting all that too? So unknown.
Yes, it's interesting because I'm on an assessment where they're in Korea, and most of them speak Korean, and it makes it hard. And the culture is very different, where they want everything lined out. They want everything exactly said, what the questions are going to be, the dates, the times. I mean, it's crazy. And then it's a lot of back and forth. And there's an interpreter in the middle. And then the calls are at like 10 p.m. Eastern time or midnight.
Wow.
So it's an interesting one. But I think, going to your point, I think it's good for each of those countries to have their own assessors and their own C3PAOs, because without them, I don't think the ecosystem can handle it. In some countries, they're actually, I have heard, and I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that they don't want assessors coming into their country and doing the assessments of their own for privacy reasons, especially in the EU. Have you guys heard that?
Yeah,
I've heard that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's understandable.
And you've also got concerns for an equivalent of ITAR. If you have an assessor coming in and they perhaps see something that they shouldn't be seeing, that's export controlled and should not be exported to the United States.
Right. Very interesting. Any other highlights from that town hall? Looking back at my notes.
I mean, obviously Title 48 being the main story, and certainly as was brought up, it could change. It could be very different than what we saw. But I'm curious what you guys think is going to happen as soon as the rule is Title 48 comes out. Let's say it hasn't really changed and it's immediate effect. So you've got 1 year for third-party assessments.
I think it's just going to
break loose.
I think it's going to, no, I don't think it's all going to break loose. I think it's going to be an increase in the slope of the ramp up curve, but it's not going to all break loose because they've got the whole year.
Well, here's what I think. And I'm dealing with a construction company. I was just chatting with the guy today. He's the IT guy in his old executive team. They hate CMMC. And they're like, we're losing money on our contracts. We're not doing CMMC until it is like in law. And so I think a lot of companies, a lot of the manufacturing, the construction, they don't want to do this. They're going to wait until they have to. And so once it drops to law, once 40CF, they're going to get serious. And that's when the boardroom discussions, and that's when, okay, all right, fine, we got to put budget in for next year. And so I think that a lot of focus is going to happen kind of in January moving into next year. And I think there's going to be a lot of budget added.
Yes.
Starting at the end of this year. So I think that's my take. So middle of next year, second, third quarter, it's going to really start ramping up. That's my take. But there's a lot of discussions happening before that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of misinformation that goes on around in the ecosystem too. And it's very, very confusing to OSCs. I've had multiple OSCs tell me, and this is a quote, to do anything until the government figures out what the rules are. And that is so sad because in general, it's pretty clear what companies need to do. We can sit here and kibitz among ourselves all day about, what's a cloud service provider and what's not, or one of these little discussions. But for 99% of the OSCs, that doesn't really matter because they're going to be either on-prem or they're going to be using one of the big clouds, and that's that. So
I do think a lot of these companies are going to struggle. The construction companies, it's going to be tough for them because they've done things the old way. And they have the mindset of a construction company is so different. Yeah. And just getting them to shift the mindset. I mean, for example, you got huge plans. And now I heard one construction company, the executives finally said, guys, we're going all iPads. And it's all VDI. And I say, look, it's going to suck for 1 year, but everybody will love it at the end of 1 year.
Yeah. Good for them. That's very prescient. Yeah. I think when a lot of these organizations with their $100,000 a year contracts with DoD, $10,000 profit, find out that it's $250,000 to get CMMC compliant. I think it's also going to change things quite a bit. I foretell lots of outreach to members of Congress. So that's part of this.
Zach, what you just mentioned there, that company with $10,000 of profit. They can't afford a CMMC solution. They can't afford even a solution like you're offering, not even close. And so they need to be able to do some really good financial analysis and figure out what the exit strategy is. So their exit strategy can be to close, it can be to merge, it could be to get more DoD business, it could be to shift to commercial, but they need to do some real analysis to figure out where they're going with that. And they need somebody who is cognizant of CMMC as well as cognizant of, business analysis and financial analysis to figure out where to go.
It's a business decision for sure.
It's a business decision, and I find it very, very sad that we're going to be losing so many of the DIB contractors because of this. Even like I say, even the lower cost solution. What is a company looking at for the ATX solution that has 10 employees? They're going to be looking at, I believe, $30,000 to $40,000, right?
I don't have that. But still, like, give me a point noted. But if they're construction, if you can't use VDI, like that's the other part of this. If you really can't, it's okay.
It's one of the best use cases for VDI, though, isn't it?
If you can do it, I mean, again, every OSC is different. Now, there are the ones that say we can never get away from printing paper until you explain to them what happens if they do, and they're like, oh yeah, actually we could. But there's some that legitimately can't get away from it, and so I don't know. It's just very challenging. I think again, even more reason for lots of companies to come into this and offer competition. But yeah, it is a tough one. I will say one thing. I think I said in the last one. I'll say it on every meeting I'm in. I can't recommend enough that an OSC just pay the $2,000 and send an employee to a CCP class. So I had two things happen in the last month that have just really kind of blown my mind. Two publicly traded companies, so unlimited money. One didn't know that you couldn't use Microsoft Commercial 365 for CUI.
Yep.
Found that on the scoping call. The other one didn't realize that if their personal phone's connected to the GCC Hive environment, that those phones are in scope.
If
Both
they
of
can
which,
download.
yeah, but both of which are like the first day of CCP class. I was just really surprised when I went through those. But yeah, can't recommend enough. People that understand IT, cybersecurity, other compliance regimes. Like that's not CMMC, right? When Mark was saying there's a Korean company that needs things translated, it's actually two translations. You have to translate from NIST to English and then English to Korean, and it's sort of reasonable to think that you can take it on your own. Unfortunately,
I think there was one that came up that I was talking to this week that it was an interesting question that I didn't even think this far down. So they're in construction, CUI, CMMC, that they're like, every one of our plans has to be stamped by a professional engineer. And so now you're even going a next level down, that these construction companies, their plans have to be signed by PEs, and the PEs aren't even, even in the supply chain to even start thinking about certification. But at this point, once that print's marked CUI, that PE is going to need a certification. I think, I talked to him about de-scoping it, removing CUI from the plans, but, at some point, at what point is what's marked on that plan? We know DoD always does awesome in marking their plans on what is CUI and what is not. When you hand that off to a PE to sign off on a building, which is required under building code, where does that line hit on that flow down?
But if the architectural firm is able to provide the PE with a VDI solution, why would that PE need CMMC certification?
You can't stamp it. You can't
stamp it. Okay. So they have to figure out a new stamping process.
I mean, if maybe not today, but I mean, there needs to be digital certification and digital stamping needing to come into the whole ecosystem and the process, because it doesn't make sense to have physical all the time.
Yeah, some industries will modernize, which is not the worst thing. Maybe the answer is blockchain. No one's brought that up yet.
Oh man, blockchain. Yeah.
Well,
it's the future.
PEs
always will be.
These are also certified on a state level, right? So you're going to have some states that almost goes back to the voting question: digital voting versus paper ballots.
Truly,
some states are going to be happy with the digital stamp, and other ones will not be.
What it
So
boils,
maybe I saw you had a question, Edgar.
yeah, it boils down to changing culture because from a few of the OSCs that I've worked with, they're comparing it to like a SOC 2 or ISO 27001, and it's not that because they're coming
Big
at it with
difference.
the approach of I could remove a control and I could circumvent this because I could just say it's not applicable. And then,
Right.
you have a whole dumpster fire, and you look like, hey, where's the main objective or assessment objective? You have the subcategories that you chose that suit your categories or what you're trying to achieve, but you remove the main thing you're trying to achieve. And what I'm seeing now as not an assessor, but somebody that's assisting OSCs is changing that culture of the executives, edifying them, even though coming to basically unearthing a lot of the dirt that they swept underneath the rug. A lot of them had these contracts for 4 or 5 years, spent the money that they were supposed to build out their infrastructure with, and now that their hand is caught in a cookie jar, they're trying to find a cheaper, more cost-effective way to implement it. But it's like, man, we're too late. So
You're right.
yeah, we can't fix that. So even if we're doing 500 assessments a day, it's not 500 clean assessments. It's like, hey, how much quality are we going to give them?
I've often asked, what is the cost of an FCA attorney versus getting compliant? Because at the end of the day, if you already have a SPURS score in the SPURS system, they can come in and check, and they are. And so at this point, it's like you either have an FCA attorney or you get compliant, and it's going to be about the same cost.
Yeah,
You're still not going to get out of it because they're going to go back and check the Spurs score. And I know a construction company right now that they're doing work for the Air Force. And for 5 years, they have submitted false reports. So then there's no way to go back and recreate that evidence. They're going to get caught.
I gave an executive a speech. I was like, okay, they know I'm poor. They're going to come for me for money. They know you have the money. They're coming for your lifespan. How do you like that? And they look at me like, what are you talking about? You're going to go to jail for fraud. I can't do that. Like, what do you want to go? How do you want to handle this? We have to pull funds from somewhere. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul. And they've been doing it for so long. So they're looking to the CCA, the lead CCAs, the CCAs, the OSCs, and the CCPs to try and make miracle. But no matter how much sugar you put over it, we can't hide. We're supposed to be objective when we come here, like, hey, we're here to represent you. Open up the books, show me what's going on. Because if you ask the right questions, it should fall right into line. We shouldn't have to worry about seeing ITAR. Reason why I say that, do you have this type of evidence for this? Yes. Can you pull it up right now? Yes. You'll know between asking that question, oh, like, hold on, I have to get with the engineer. I have to see what we're doing, things like that. So there's no ambiguity about how we're approaching these OSCs and how they're handling their CUI and their ITAR or whatever regulation they're doing. Our job is to be objectified or objectify what they're doing. We don't really need to see it unless we're the lead CCA on that or the assessor portion of it. But we're helping them. Hey, can you prove this? We don't need access to it.
Good insights. Good insights. So as we get ready to wrap it up, any, I guess, quick lightning round, any tips for OSCs who are going through the process now, what y'all are seeing on the front lines doing assessments in terms of what's causing organizations to fail? What are they ones who are successful? Quick high level takeaways for the audience.
I think the big thing is to document and have the culture of documenting what you're doing, because people seem to think that cybersecurity in general and CMMC in particular is all about technical controls, and those technical controls can be implemented in days if you've got the right provider that is your partner. But the culture is not something that you can implement in days, and you have to work at it.
Yeah, I agree. That the assessments I've done, the clean ones are always the ones that have either a CCA or a C3PAO or an MSP that's a level 2. Those ones I'm just like, hallelujah, they're so smooth.
Yeah.
I will tell you a funny little joke. I did get a policy that was for their, it was 3.1.22, right? The public communication.
Yeah.
And in the very top, I could tell it was ChatGPT. Like all of their policies were ChatGPT. But this one was hilarious. It said, scope. This applies to all CUI intended for public dissemination.
Turn my camera on for that.
Very nice.
That's bad.
But that's the value of having an MSP or an assessor that really can understand it and help these companies through, because a lot of them just don't know. So
Right,
I'm a huge believer that's the number one.
I have seen this ChatGPT, by the way, multiple times. And I've also seen companies that download policies online from, templates. And then they just take those templates and they put their logo at the top. They sign their name at the bottom. The templates talk about, they're digital only. And then they've got a whole policy and procedure about how they shred paper documents and they lock it in safes. And it turns out they don't even have a safe. And
they have a VDI.
And then you ask them about it and they say, what safe? What do you mean? And you're like, well, you signed this document. And then you pull it up and they say, oh, yeah, well, that's so that if we ever have to do that, we don't forget about it. And I'm like, no, I've got to see you're safe now that you put it in your document.
Right.
I blame SANS for that. I think they were one of the first ones in the industry to publish cybersecurity policies on the web templates. And so, the number of SANS templates I've seen throughout the years is immense.
All right. On that note, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you all for joining and recapping the town hall. Back next month, see what updates we have. Hopefully, we have a final rule in the Federal Register. That'd be cool.
Let's hope.
48.
Thanks,
I know
everyone.
Elvis said he's starting the pool, so you all can contact Elvis to put in your bets for what date.
I'll sell you by the square. Okay, I got October 22nd. If someone wants another date, just let me know.
I got Halloween.
All right,
y'all. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night.
See you. Good night.
Hey, guys.